The Middle East and North Africa is a region that regularly endures extended periods of social unrest and armed conflict. According to a report released by the Global Terrorism Database, 19,000 people were killed in the region by terrorist incidents in 2016, 55% of the world's total figure. Comparatively, Western Europe lost 238 victims, 0.7% overall. Terrorism is a complex concept with no universal definition. However, the CIA defines it as premeditated, politically motivated violence perpetrated against non-combatant targets by subnational groups or clandestine agents. Despite extensive research into the field, analysts consistently disagree over competing narratives of Middle Eastern terrorism. The first is someone who has grown up disenfranchised because of limited socio-economic opportunity and an inability to create change within the wider political sphere. Studies have found that subjects had a greater inclination to endorse collective ideas, such as terrorism, if they had a lower rate of personal success, suggesting that these networks provide a perceived sense of social and economic fulfillment that's currently unattainable in their personal lives.
So if you're unemployed in the suburbs of Cairo, you may be angry, not just because you're poor, but because you see some people living a very wealthy life and getting access to the jobs that your university degree qualifies you for, but you can't get the connection because you don't have the right family connections. Now, that doesn't automatically make you a terrorist, but it makes you more vulnerable to somebody who comes knocking and says, you know, what's wrong? We've got to change the system.
The alternative is someone who, regardless of economic status, uses violent extremism in the name of religion as a way to directly challenge Western ideological thought.
If somebody says it's got nothing to do with religion, that's an overstatement. If they say it's all about religion, in the West we often say, look, it's all about Islam, that's the problem. Well, that just misses really important components of what's going on.
So the point is, religions have tools, concepts, what we call mechanisms in their repertoire, and cultures all have those things. And one of them or another can easily be used in order to justify forms of violence. So jihad is one of them. For most Muslims, the term means an ethical responsibility to struggle with oneself, while it is used, as we see in the news, by those groups in justifying their killings of dominantly other Muslims.
Some experts have suggested that terrorism could be a defensive reaction against rapid globalization by those who believe that the fundamentalist way of life is facing extinction. But what if it's not just one of these scenarios that's radicalizing the upcoming generation, but a combination of situational, psychological, and political factors? Corruption and violence can significantly impact the growth and development of a country, which can result in a lack of access to basic resources, an increase in unemployment, and an economic and political inequality. The younger generation throughout the Middle East often struggle with the highest rates of unemployment, which is difficult to rectify as the median age in countries such as Iraq, Jordan, Egypt, and Yemen falls between 19 and 24, compared to Australia where the median age is 38. Coupled with feelings of growing disenfranchisement and resentment, pre-existing psychological influences such as mental illness could also contribute to the formation of extremist beliefs. A recent study of lone wolf attackers concluded that 40% had identifiable mental health problems and were using a real or perceived enemy to project blame of their individual injustices onto. While immigrating to somewhere such as Australia, the United Kingdom, or the United States might increase an individual's socio-economic opportunities in theory, assimilating to a new culture can often intensify feelings of isolation and desire for community acceptance. This experience can prove additionally challenging amidst the divisive rhetoric projected by certain local and international leaders.
My question is, will the Attorney General then ban the burqa in this House?
I think Islam hates us. There's something there that there's a tremendous hatred.
Terrorist networks such as the Islamic State often take advantage of the wider political climate to target and recruit disenfranchised Muslim youth.
اسمي داود عمري 14 سنة أحب أن أصير بدولة الإسلام في العراق والشام وأقاتل معهم لأنهم يحبون أن يقاتلون المرتدين والكفراء.
Exploiting methods of communication such as personal contact or social media, IS project an empty promise of a glamorous lifestyle underpinned by an idealistic political purpose, a scenario that can significantly appeal to someone that's frustrated by a lack of opportunity.
With a group like Islamic State, they push very hard on a narrative that says your personal failures and frustrations are not just personal, they're part of a cosmic injustice, and you need to join with us and fight this cosmic injustice. And then it's a question of circumstances. If the nation state works well, it's very hard for terrorists to recruit. If the nation state is falling apart, then there's lots of opportunity for a group to put down roots and then recruit on a very large scale.
Compared to the complex plots of attacks such as 9/11, which involved years of planning and 19 al-Qaeda hijackers that targeted the economic center of the United States, groups such as IS have instead focused on inspiring methods of solo terrorism, such as stabbings and vehicle rammings. The rise of senseless lone wolf attacks in both the West and the Middle East has reconstructed the traditional framework of terrorism as a more simple and accessible method that's proving increasingly difficult to predict and intercept. What does this mean for counter-terrorism efforts moving forward? The relationship between the actions of governments and the actions of terrorist networks is complicated, as each one determines the other. For example, when a government retaliates against an organisation after an attack, that same organisation can capitalise on that use of force to further spread their propaganda.
If you can't fix the underlying political problems and restore good governance, then that insurgency will just grow and grow in strength. And there's no signs yet that that's going to be dealt with properly.
Psychologist Dr. Max Taylor suggests that standard counter-terrorism methods tend to interpret things from our perspective based on what makes sense to us. That's not really the issue. The issue is what makes sense to people on the ground.
As I've said before, and I know our military leaders agree, this broader challenge of countering violent extremism is not simply a military effort. Ideologies are not defeated with guns, they're defeated by better ideas.
The concept of terrorism will only continue to evolve, and in order for our methods of research and counter-terrorism to simultaneously adapt, understanding the possible situational, psychological and political factors that are underlying the path to radicalisation is key. We have to go to a break, but stick around as Superintendent of the Victorian Counter-Terrorism Command, Ross McNeill, joins me to further discuss the environment and contributing factors that breed extremism.